Welcome to a Progress City Extra, and happy October 1st. It's the 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World. My name is Michael Crawford. With me, as always, is Jeff Crawford. Jeff, it's here.
I know. I wish I was there, but, it's fun to watch everything from afar and think about all the history of the 50th.
I know. You kind of just get used to things being how they are. And, really all this year, looking back as we have this year, it's really gotten me into the spirit of things and seeing everybody come down for the event and everybody having such a good time and all the history stuff that's been going on social media. It's really taken me back.
That's right. And we will be celebrating in full next Tuesday when our official episode comes out. Michael, we came up with this idea pretty immediately, but I need to make Progress City Extra music for the future.
It's true. Yeah, this was a spur of the moment thing, but we need that Dateline Disney style music.
Next time.
For breaking news. But we just thought it would be fun. There's been a lot of talk on Twitter this morning about how Roy Disney was really the driving force in making Walt Disney World happen. Without him, it never would have happened. And I would probably, I don't know what I would be doing. I don't know what any of us would have been doing with our lives. But it would have been a very different world we live in if not for Roy's stick-to-itiveness.
That's right. And, it was something that he went above and beyond. He did not have to do. He chose to do. It seems it's just very inspiring, the effort he put into making Walt Disney World happen. And again, we talk about that more in our full episode. But we thought it'd be fun to go back and look at a couple of interviews, and one that you have not heard, talking a little bit about Roy.
Absolutely. We have, for our Patreon supporters, we have occasionally put up extended versions of interviews for people. And of course, one of the people we talked to a lot was Frank Stanek. And, Frank had some Roy stories that didn't make it into our initial broadcast that, we thought we'd like to share with you today. How long did it take for WED to decide that they were going to go forward with the project after Walt passed?
Well, the WED didn't make that decision. That was Roy's decision.
Of course.
Yeah, Roy decided, it's kind of interesting, I guess. You read a lot about the relationships between Walt and Roy, and the standard story is that Roy was there to support his brother, and his brother always had the crazy ideas, and Roy always had to find the money to make them happen, right? That's the standard short version. And but I do think that there was a true appreciation among the brothers for each other and what they did. And when Walt passed away, I wasn't privy to Roy's decision making, but there was no question. It didn't take very long where Roy said, "We're going to move ahead with this project," and he became very active in making sure the project got built, and was active in many aspects of it that you would think he didn't need to be or shouldn't be or whatever, but he flew. Once we started construction, there was a monthly meeting in the field in Orlando, and Roy was in that meeting every month, keeping track of the progress. He was over at WED looking at what they were thinking of. There's a photo that I was involved in of the meeting in the Florida conference room, which eventually I inherited as part of my office.
Oh.
And I had Marvin's old office, and I was the keeper of the Florida conference room, and so all the meetings were held in there. And we had a meeting on. Remember one time we had a meeting on Lake Buena Vista, and there was a discussion about what should we call Lake Buena Vista. It all revolved around the lake, and at the end, Roy was the guy who said, "Let's name it Lake Buena Vista."
Oh, interesting.
Variations of that were thrown out, but then Roy said, "No, Lake Buena Vista." So, tied in with the studio being on Buena Vista Street, and there was a lake there, so that became Lake Buena Vista. And Roy made that decision in a meeting I sat in. So, and everybody agreed at that time. So.
That's interesting. It's interesting that he was so involved. You always think of him as you said, not being more the business side, not really being on the creative side. It's interesting that he really rolled up his sleeves and got in there.
There's a trip that, it's a long story, but we were making the monorail beams in Tacoma, Washington, and transporting them to Orlando by rail car. And Joe Fowler was very much involved in this. John Wise, our chief engineer, for Roger Brogy is building the monorail. We all jump in the G1 to fly up to Tacoma, Washington. And it so happened, Roy wanted to go along and see what was going on. So his wife, Edna, had relatives, I guess, in Seattle. So to get to Tacoma, we had to go to Seattle TCAP, they call it SeaTac, Seattle Tacoma Airport. And Roy brings her along, and Roy, Disney's youngest, well, at the time, I think it was his first son, Patrick. So Patrick was about 7, so we all jump on the G1. It was the day after Thanksgiving. We fly up the coast to Seattle, and the day was one of those beautiful California fall days, winter days. You could see straight across the Pacific to Japan. It was so clear. We get to Seattle, and if you remember those little Abner cartoons with Joe Blitzvik with the cloud over his head, that's what Seattle looked like.
Sure.
Cloud over Seattle. Now, I've spent a lot of time on the company planes. I knew the pilots well, so I happened to go up forward, and they point out to me that we're in a holding pattern here because we can't land at SeaTac because it's fogged in. And he says, "Look at all those planes down there." I mean, the fog was, as I found out later, the ceiling was like 500 feet. So the fog is not more than 500 feet off the ground. And so everything above it's clear, but we could see planes. There must have been a dozen aircraft just rotating in circles over Seattle looking. And then every so often one would spin off out of that and go somewhere else, like to Portland or something like that. So the pilots point this out to me. And so they said, okay, so we're now being delayed, right? So we got one problem, we had these meetings set up, so we're now being delayed. And we're only going up for the day for these meetings. So we got a delay. Edna's getting worried that her relatives are waiting at the SeaTac airport. She doesn't, this is before cell phones and things like that.
Sure, right.
So anyway, the pilots say, here's what we're going to do. Everett, which is the Boeing field north of Seattle, was clear. He says, we're going to land at Everett because Everett's clear. Boeing says we can land there. So we landed there. They rearranged all the, the stewards working on all the car arrangements. So we get all the cars relocated from SeaTac to Everett. And we land the plane, and Joe Fowler says to me, he says, Frank, we're running late. I am going to go with the engineers. We're all going to go down to the meetings in Tacoma. You've been there before, so I want you to take Roy and Patrick to SeaTac and meet her relatives, and then you and Roy, you drive Roy back down to the fabrication facility in Tacoma, and you'll be a little late, but that's okay. We got to have these meetings going. So yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can do.
Sure, absolutely.
What am I going to say, right? So I've never been to Everett. I don't know Seattle. I know nothing except I know that I-4 goes north-south, and I only had to worry about being sure I was going in the right direction when I left the Everett airport. And so I had to go south, and I said, okay, moss grows on the north side of trees. So that was basically my orientation. No problem. I drive down I-4, get to the Seattle airport, which is south of Seattle, pull up to the terminal, and Edna gets out with Patrick, and they meet her relatives, and everybody's happy, and all of that good stuff. And then Roy says, okay, let's go. And he and I get back in the car. We drive out, and now I got to get to Tacoma. Same thing, just get on I-4, go south, and I knew where to turn off.
Hope you find it. You didn't have GPS in the car at that time.
No. So anyway, we're leaving the airport, and the interchange to get onto the I-4 is not that far away. But there's a bunch of signs, and this way, that way, the usual freeway type signs. And I pull into the right lane, and Roy says to me, "Are you sure you're going the right way?"
Oh boy.
And okay, so I say to him, "Yes, sir. I've been here before." I said, I know this is the road." He says to me again, "You sure about that?" He says, I don't think this is the right way." I knew I was right, and there's no place to stop and have a discussion. Because the car is moving,
right,
60 miles an hour. So I turned to Roy, and I politely, as best as I could say, I said, "Sir, since I'm driving the car, I believe I'm going in the right direction." He didn't say anything, and we get on to the south, and he finally realizes at some point that we are heading south, and he takes out a cigar and starts smoking a cigar.
Oh, wow.
But I thought, I'm saying to myself, oh my God, I now have to have a discussion with Roy Disney on whether we're going in the right direction. And I couldn't figure out how to tell him politely. I mean, I was all this stuff going through my mind, But Roy, he was a good man. He was a good man. So
yeah. Well, that's good because we don't hear too much about him, and what he was like to work with. So it's interesting that you were able to have some dealings with him that not a lot of people really had that chance.
Well, yeah, and I was probably 27 years old at the time.
Oh, holy smokes!
He's the chairman of the board of the company, and I know where I'm going.
Like, trust me, Mr. Disney, I know where I'm going.
But anyway, we got there. The meetings were pretty much over. So, frankly, the good part of it, Roy was able to take a tour of the facilities, because it was an interesting operation that we had engaged in there. And we saw how the beams were cast and so forth, and the mechanics of it all. And then we all got back in the cars and drove back to SeaTac because we got word that the pilots, Seattle opened up, and the pilots were able to fly the plane from Everett to SeaTac and land there, and we would meet everybody at SeaTac. And so we get to the terminal. It's winter, so it's dark.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in the terminal, and the pilots come in and said, the airport's socked in again. There's no planes landing or taking off. But the ceiling is only 500 feet. And we figure that if we can get to the end of the runway, we should be able to take off and not have a problem. And
that's reassuring.
Apparently, Roy and Edna and did not want to spend the night. So I'll tell you, it was so foggy that we held hands walking out to the aircraft.
Oh, good grief.
All 8 of us are at that point. And you could not see very far. And so we held hands, got out to the airport, I got out to the plane, loaded up on the plane. Then I went up front with the jump seat with the pilots because I was left in charge of the airplane. Joe Fowler said, Frank, you're in charge of the airplane.
Oh, wonderful.
That was his other instruction. So I go up, talk to the pilots, and they get on the radio and they call the control tower, and they said, do you have ground radar? Because we cannot see the taxiway lights, which are blue. It would help us if you could guide us out the taxiway. And the guy comes back and he says, nobody is going to be landing, so why don't we'll get you on the runway and you can just taxi all the way down the runway to the other end. And we did that.
Oh, wow.
We did that. And I'll tell you, I was on that G1 for lots of times, and the pilots on this time, they locked the brakes, revved that engine up to wherever RPMs they needed to, and they popped the brakes, and that plane just went straight up, and as soon as it cleared 500 feet, it was a beautiful starlit sky.
It's like taking off from a carrier or something. It
was literally that. Matter of fact, it was literally that. That's exactly what happened. I mean, that thing, those guys, they gave it everything, that power, held those brakes, and then just popped them, and that thing we were off the ground really quick.
Man, Roy must really not have wanted to stay with relatives that night. I
don't think so. Yeah, I don't know what it was, but there was no question we weren't going to spend the night. We were going to get home. I'll tell you, though, I don't know if it was the stress of the day, but I ended up I came down with the flu, and I came down with the flu on the way home.
Oh, no.
Whatever it took, 2.5, 3-hour flight back from Seattle. When I got to the Burbank, I mean, I was not feeling really well at all. John Wise had to drop me off at home. He lived in Glendale as well, where I was living at the time, and he drove me home, dropped me off, and I picked up my car the next day or 2 days later. I don't remember. I couldn't even drive home.
Oh, wow, it really took it out. It was a stressful day in Seattle.
It was, yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if it was just, the change in climate or whatever, but I tell you, it was an interesting day. But it was a good experience with Roy, but it just shows you that he was that active in knowing what was going on and wanted to participate, and he was, it was his decision to move ahead.
Well, that trip sounded very like one I would not want to be on, except for the monorail factory. Everything else sounded...
It's a really harrowing trip to the monorail factory.
Yes. Yeah, it's really touching hearing these people talk about Roy and how he was at this time. And we also, some of you have heard our interview with Scott Girard. He was also involved in the company doing landscape architecture, and he had some experiences with Roy as well.
And here's a funny story. One night we were replacing the two oak trees that you see in many photographs on either side of the castle,
Right.
in the hub, out near the the street or the hub street. But they're the two main. I mean, we had done our best to find two matched trees, and they both drowned in that mess. And so we're replacing them just before opening, and so the pub is paved and trees are planted and the lights are on and we're digging these trees up. And it's 2:30 in the morning. We're working by work light, and we get these trees out, and just as we're pulling the tree out, I'm backing up to get away from what I know is coming, was this stench.
Oh no!
Anaerobic stench out of this hole as this thing sucks these trees out of the ground, and you can hear them. And so I backed up to the curb, and I stepped off the curb, and I bumped into something. I turned around, and here was Dick Nunes.
Oh no!
With a golf cart, and sitting next to him in the front seat is Roy.
Oh wow!
Oh my goodness!
And Edna's behind him. His wife Edna's behind him. Now this is 2:30 in the morning, and and about that time that tree comes out of the ground. Out it comes, and within a few seconds that stench hits us. And Dick's waving his hand in front of his face, and Roy grabs his nose. And I just remember seeing that image of the chief financial officer of the company, who had probably been part of the decision not to bring good soil in,
Right.
to reap the benefits of a financial decision that he'd probably been a part of.
The karma payback finally came around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to wonder what in the world Roy and especially Edna were doing out at 2:30 in the morning driving around.
Oh, Roy was, they'd fly in and the radios. If they flew in the afternoon, he was going to be on the site that night. You couldn't keep him from it. He was a wonderful guy.
Oh, that's interesting.
And he was just so motivated to make sure that the project got done and following the construction and he was just a great guy.
We always like to hear stories about him because you rarely do hear stories about him, but he was so important.
Very vitally important. And if you're interested, I can tell you another Roy story.
Oh,
please.
absolutely.
Probably a month or 6 weeks later, after this incident with the trees, Bill and I were in the office up there in the tree farm, and it was after construction had quit for the day. And it was amazing how once the equipment stopped running, you're up there at the north end of the property, there wasn't a sound. It was just so quiet and peaceful. And Bill and I would always end the day, we'd spend the last hour and a half or 2 hours making the plans for the next day's work and making sure we had everything that we needed, and crews were queued up, and we're ready to hit the ground running at 6 or 6:30 in the morning. And so we hear a car pull into the compound. We had gravel driveways and parking area there. So we hear this car pull in, and then a few minutes later we hear these feet shuffling on the wood deck outside, and the trailer door open. And I'm sitting across the desks faced each other, and Bill's faced the door of the office, and I was facing toward Bill. I didn't see who came in. And so Bill looks up. We hear footsteps coming in through the office, and Bill looks up and he goes, "Hey, Roy, how are you?" I turn around and it's Roy Disney. And he's got on a pair of khakis and some boots and open collar shirt. And he says, come on in, Roy. He says, you know Scotty, right? And I go, oh, yeah, good to see you, Scott. And so Roy sat down in a folding chair next to me, a metal chair sitting next to me. And I offered him my office chair, my desk chair. And he said, no, I got this. He sat there. So we were talking, they chit chat, and Bill lived across the street. Bill lived in Bay Hill, and he lived across the street from the Disney cottages there. And Roy and Edna's had one of those cottages that the company kept for them whenever they were in and out of town. So Bill and his wife, Jane, they were on social gathering status with Roy and Edna when they were in town. So they were very close friends. And so they had a little family chit chat. How's everybody? How's this? How's that? And finally, Roy said, look, he said, I don't want to bother you guys too long. He said, but I'm on my way to New York next week to get some money, enough money to finish this project. And I need to know how much more money, you guys need to finish the landscape. Because we need to finish this project, and we're going to finish it on time. And I want to make sure we've got enough money. So Bill, we've been thinking about how much more we needed. I think our budget for that whole project at the time was $4.2 million, I think.
Oh, wow.
Just in landscape, and which was a lot of money back then.
Sure.
And Bill said, Roy, I think we could probably use another 450, 500,000. He says, now, are you sure? Because I can't go back again. And Bill said, no. He said, I think 500,000. That's a number I seem to remember. He said, I think 500,000 will do it. And I remember it like it was yesterday. Roy just said, he leaned back in that chair, tipped that chair back, and he looked up at the ceiling, and he says, I just got to make sure we finish this project, Bill. He said, I just don't know that I can face Walt.
Wow.
Wow.
So he said, we've got to finish this project. We are going to finish it. And so what he did is he went to New York and he borrowed some money on a medium-term loan at a certain interest rate. And I don't know if it was Chase Manhattan or who he borrowed the money from, but first thing he did is he turned around and he loaned that money on shorter term loans at higher rates.
Brilliant.
And when the bank found out, they were pretty upset.
I'm sure.
And they wanted to call the loan, and he said, they said, you said you were going to use this money to finish the park. And he says, I am. I'm going to use every dime of it, plus the added interest.
Oh, wow.
Finish the park. And you're going to get your money. And
wow.
That was the way that ended.
It just it never fails to amaze me when I read about, the business, how he funded all this stuff. Just this pretty uneducated guy from the Midwest and just a genius, an absolute genius at working the system to fund all these things.
Just down to earth, just salt of the earth kind of guy, and level-headed. He's just a wonderful, wonderful guy.
All right, folks, that wraps up this Progress City Radio Hour Extra. Michael, are you excited about Tuesday?
Oh, I'm excited about Tuesday. And, you said our 50th episode. This is only the first.
That's right.
Of first in a series of 50th. We've got a big episode coming up for you. It takes us from around, I'd say, 1965 to grand opening day in the end of October 1971. So a 6 years period. And we kind of skip from topic to topic of interesting things that happened in that period. We have some nice archival audio for you. We have some soundscapes that Jeff has put together that are very entertaining. And, of course, we have Ron Mizaker.
Yes. Who you have to hear to believe his
Truly.
tales. Yes.
Truly.
So stay tuned to this feed, and we look forward to joining you on Tuesday with the beginning of a celebration of Walt Disney World's 50th anniversary.
Happy 50, everyone.